And we are, thank you. I am Asha Nayaswami. This is my friend Keshava Betts. And we are so happy to be spending this time with you. It's just, you all are so close to my heart and my family spirit. And I think so often of the wonderful work that is going on there. And by wonderful work, I mean the opening of the hearts of so many people to Master's ray of grace. And I consider Mumbai to be my second home because so many of the people that I love so dearly live there. So someday, God willing, not too long, we won't just be talking over the camera, but we'll be all in the same place singing together in person. What joy, what joy. So let's begin with a prayer. Heavenly Father, Divine Mother, friend, beloved God, Jesus Christ, Babaji Krishna, Lahiri Mahashaya, Swami Sri Yukteswar, beloved Master Paramahansa Yogananda, saints of all religions, dear friend and guide Swami Kriyananda, humbly we bow to you all. Bless us with deep devotion that springs effortlessly from the heart of our being, that everything in this world remind us of your loving presence, whether gifts of joy or gifts of sorrow, whether effortless or challenging. Help us to know that behind every life experience is your guiding hand and your unconditional love. Om. Peace. Amen. We'll have a couple of chants, a minute or two of meditation, and then I'll have the joy of sharing with you for a while.
Sorrow 1,000 years or till tomorrow. In the valley of sorrow 1,000 years or till tomorrow. But I'll wait to see only you, just you. My Lord, I want to see only you, just you. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire. Just for you, just you. My Lord, I want to see only you, just you. In the valley of sorrow 1,000 years or till tomorrow. In the valley of sorrow 1,000 years or till tomorrow. But I'll wait to see only you, just you. My Lord, I want to see only you, just you. My heart's aflame. soul's afire, my heart's aflame, my soul's afire, just for you, just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. In the valley of sorrow, 1,000 years or till tomorrow. In the valley of sorrow, 1,000 years or till tomorrow. But I'll wait to see only just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire, just for you, just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. In the valley of sorrow, 1,000 years or till tomorrow. In the valley of sorrow, 1,000 years or till tomorrow. But I'll wait to see only just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire. My heart's aflame, my soul's afire, just for you, just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. My Lord, I want to see only just you. Just you.
Let's meditate now together for just a couple of minutes, drawing all our energy to a single focus and asking God and Guru to inspire us, that we may feel their presence deeply, that we may receive their wisdom, that the promise of this incarnation may be fulfilled by their grace. Om, peace. Amen. Narayani invited me to share with you this evening, and I was absolutely delighted to say yes. Keshava and I, and at the present time also Jamal, who's here from Chandigarh, share a house here in Palo Alto. So when she asked, I roped him into service, and he was kind enough to sing for us, and he'll sing for us at the end also. When Narayani sent the topic, she just assigned it to me. Living for God is martyrdom. I appreciate when people just assign me topics. I had to spend so many years making them up. It's like the DNA to do it is just gone. So I didn't have any right to complain when she gave it to me, but I have to say I was a little shocked. How about everlasting joy, or, joy is the fruit of all self-effort, God is bliss. Living for God is martyrdom. Come on, sister, really? And the phrase comes out of Swami's book, The New Path, and it's very interesting, the context of it. So I'm going to read it to you before I speak. Let's see. Exactly. Thereafter, let's see. Master, well, actually, I can't read all of it because I realize it's much longer than I thought it was. But Swamiji, Master often said to Swamiji, you have a great work to do. And Master was never very specific with Swamiji about what that great work was. But once he began to speak about it, Swamiji said, in many different contexts, Master would continue to say, you have a great work to do, therefore you must do this because you have a great work to do. And then he said, after Master died, Master's successor, Rajasi, would from time to time say the same thing to Swamiji, you have a great work to do. And he said, clearly, in the context of Master's remarks on several occasions, mine was to be a public work, one on which I would have to stand perhaps independently on my own feet, and one therefore perhaps not closely associated with the institution. Then Swami says very, just honestly, and now bear in mind, Master passed when Swami was 25 years old, and he came to Master when he was 22. So everything that happened in Swamiji's life in direct association Master was over before he was 26. So he was just starting out. So Swami says, instinctively, I feared such responsibility. I wanted to be in tune with Master and not to dance the wild jig of outward success and acclaim, fraught as it is with temptations. We are here, Dayamata had said to Swamiji, to please Master. Couldn't I prayed, just please him from the background, the safe ground, where no lure of outward importance could intrude? I don't want to do a great work, Swami writes. I wrote to Rajasi the day after he had spoken those words to me. I just want to serve Master unnoticed. Rajasi's reply was to come and bless me again, smiling quietly. But when one time I resisted Master's efforts to draw me into teaching activities, his response was brusque. Living for God, he told me sternly, is martyrdom. Well, there you have it, don't you? It was very interesting to me that when I went to look it up, because I knew it was in the path and I knew the phrase living for God is martyrdom had been Master's words to Swamiji, but to see the context in which it was offered. And the context is the Guru is laying out in front of Swamiji his entire life's work. I mean, now, all these years later, we can see how the whole thing unfolded, how the young man of 22, that Master saw in him what he was going to become. And all of us, certainly my own life, and all of our lives have been formed by Swami Kriyananda. I met Swamiji when I was 22. He walked into the room. As soon as he walked into the room, I knew he was what I had been looking for. I had been looking for what it meant to live for God. And I saw it right in front of me in Swamiji, and before he even spoke. And from that day to this moment, as I speak to you, he's been the pole star. He's been the fixed point of reference around which everything in my life spins. And there it was, back at that time, Master was pulling him into the reality that certainly gave me my own life. And Swamiji was there because he really wanted, to say it mildly, he too had been desperately searching, which is what the path describes to us in such detail, that Swamiji was utterly desperate to find meaning and purpose in life. And then Autobiography of a Yogi came to him. And within 5 days, he was kneeling in front of Master. Master put his hand on Swami's heart and blessed him as a disciple and as a monk. Swami tells the story there that for 2 minutes, he said, Master had his hand on his heart and his hand was vibrating. It was shaking. There was so much power there. Swami had not even heard about the word guru, really. A week before that, and then he's kneeling in front of him. And the way Swami described it was, from that moment on, everything about him was changed. His entire consciousness was shifted. Master knew he didn't have much time with him. He just gave him everything like that. Now, as eager as Swamiji was to please his guru, to find a meaningful life, when Master began to push him, he began to resist. I don't want to. All this, I'm afraid, the responsibility, just, all that public acclaim. It's like, what if? What if I can't do it? What if it causes me to fall spiritually? And he says he expressed it to Rajasi, and he said Rajasi didn't talk a lot. Rajasi didn't have much conversation. He had no small talk, Swami said, and he didn't have much conversation at all. So here Swami expresses to Rajasi, I don't want to do this. Rajasi just comes to his room, blesses Swamiji, leaves. No words, no explanation, no long, how do you feel, what if, none of that. Just gives him the energy like that. And then when Swami, he tells us earlier, when Master was living, Swami again expressed what you would think would be a valid concern. And then Master just sternly says, living for God is martyrdom. Now, who would want to live for God if it was just suffering? And so when we hear that word martyrdom, well, especially those of us who live in a Christian context where suffering, has been how they've interpreted the life of Christ, they could have so easily chosen the resurrection as the definition of the life of Christ, but instead they chose the crucifixion. So he's suffering, and in so many images of Christianity, you have Jesus on the cross dying. It is a gruesome image. And there's so much emphasis on the suffering, and the word martyrdom in the West at least, comes out of all of that, being stoned to death or burned to death or all these different things. Awful, just awful. Like, who would get up in the morning and say, oh, I hope I can be burned to death? Who as a young child would sort of long for that sort of thing? And even when Master says to Swami, living for God is martyrdom, he can't possibly mean that suffering is the answer. Master was an avatar of joy. From joy I came, for joy I live. In sacred joy I melt. When you look at his poem Samadhi, and those lines are from his poem Samadhi, which is describing to us where we're going on this whole spiritual path, the last lines of that poem, which many of us have heard that poem over and over again, or memorized it or recite it. And every so often I really realize the last lines, a tiny bubble of laughter. I am become the sea of mirth itself. That's what it says. Laughter, mirth. And we've gone through, anger, greed, good, bad, salvation, lusts. I swallowed, transmuted all, great oceans of this and whirlpools of melancholy and all this stuff. Where does it end? A tiny bubble of laughter. And just, I am the little bit of laughter, and I become the sea of mirth. He doesn't even use the word bliss at the end. He uses the word mirth, which means like, happy enjoyment. It's such a light-hearted word that is the culmination. And he tells us to memorize that poem and recite it every day. And if you do, I've been in and out of that practice over many years. I do it for a while, and then I lose it, then I find it again. If you do it, the energy of it just keeps going deeper and deeper into you. And then Master says, living for God is martyrdom. So I did the obvious. What does martyrdom actually mean? And you find multiple definitions. Some of the definitions are very, Jesus suffering oriented. Martyrdom means, to die, preferably in some horrible way, because you refuse to renounce your religion. So that's the good side of refusing to renounce your religion, and the bad side of it is, oh my gosh, what happens to you afterwards? But there's other definitions, and these are the definitions that I like. To give up something that is of great value to you, even your own life, and that's where martyrdom is often associated with death. even your own life for the sake of a higher ideal. And that ideal being the ideal, usually the ideal of God. Now, isn't that wonderful? Let's think even for a moment what might be the definition of love. You know, when somebody really loves you and gives to you something of great value, even something of themselves that's of great value. I mean, even just think of a father and a mother, and they want to have a family, and perhaps the father has this desire, you know, that he would like to have a son or a daughter, a way to pass on what he has accomplished. I mean, the male cannot give birth to the child, but the father gives the mother the capacity, you know, through the sperm and the ovum, to grow inside herself a child. And when the mother grows that child, which is the father's child as much as it is her own, her whole body is sacrificed to do that. And women who give birth to many children, they literally give of their own life. And the biology of it is that the body will favor the baby. So women lose their teeth or whatever may happen, less so in modern times. But nonetheless, the commitment of the mother is that the baby will have the priority and the mother's body will be drained. Now, that is giving something of great value for the sake of another, isn't it? And then the father's life, in the traditional way, and we're talking the archetype now, then the father is the protector and the provider. And he may have had his own ideas about what he would have done with his life, but now he's the protector and the provider. Swami has a statue. Swami bought a statue in Bali many years ago, and it's about the moon, and the moon is being consumed. It's sort of I'm not giving you a very clear image, but it's where the image is being consumed from the bottom. And one of the traditional statues that I saw was the picture of the father being consumed by the child, is what it was. And it was considered to be a beautiful image, because once the child is born, the father gives his life for it. But in the noblest, highest, most beautiful sense, nobody thinks of this as sacrifice. Nobody thinks of this as martyrdom. We call this love, don't we? Because I love you more than I love myself. My friend Purushottama, who raised 4 children, and he talked about before he was a father, before his children were born, he said he thought he was a pretty generous-hearted guy, and the truth of it was he was. He was a very generous-hearted guy. But he said once his children were there, he said he realized that he was only playing at being selfless, because he gave what he wanted to give, but there was never the power that came from the way he wanted to give to his children. And then he realized what real giving is. But we don't call that martyrdom. We call that love, don't we? Now, why Master particularly chose that word to speak to Swami, there's many ways that you could think about it. You know, Sister Gyanamata writes in her letters, her book God Alone, which is extraordinary. If you haven't already immersed yourself into it, I can't speak highly enough about the power that's in that book. And she writes very succinctly. And there's a place in that book where I'm not going to be able to quote it exactly, but this is how the meaning has come to me. And she says, and she was very, very giving. when they had too many guests in the house, she would go sleep in the laundry room, and she just did all of that sort of thing easily. But still, more was asked of her. And she uses the phrase, she said, I gradually came to understand that I had to give up everything, even those that were right, that were good in themselves, that belonged to me. And then she added this wonderful phrase, that harmed no one. Even those things that harmed no one, meaning no one was diminished by her having those things. But she said, even that had to be given over to God. And she didn't write this, but this is the salient point. If she was going to be truly free. Now, if you just want to do a little bit and be better than you were, I mean, that's good. Let's each of us do what we can, and even a little practice of this inward religion will free us from dire fears and colossal sufferings. And as Swami writes in our Festival of Light, even a little practice, will do this. So it's also a question of who are we really deeply within ourselves. And this is, Master has this wonderful definition of humility. And his definition of humility is self-honesty. And one of the hardest things on the spiritual path is to just really be able to see who we are and be at peace with who we are. I remember there was a woman friend of mine here in this community, and she had a co-worker, a man, who was very difficult for her to get along with. And she wrote to Swamiji complaining about him, and there was a fair amount to complain about. She wasn't a weakling. He was tough. And she wrote to Swami just saying how difficult it was. And Swami says, let's see, how did he say it exactly? He said, he just needs love. He just needs you to love him. And my friend was honest enough to write back to Swami, Sir, I don't want to be that good. It was just perfect. I just don't want to be that good. And she was being humble, and she was being honest. I would want to be that good, but I don't have it in me to give up even that much. And in that case was, but what I say, her justification in not liking him. Now, that was not something that was hers by right that harmed no one, because it harmed him and it harmed her. So when Master says to Swami, living for God is martyrdom, I don't suppose Master said that to everyone. And Swamiji also, he did share it with all of us, but it's a very challenging teaching. I'm very touched by a story in the life of Saint Teresa of Avila, who was very devoted to Jesus. She was when the 1500s maybe, I'm not sure of her exact dates, but around that time in Spain. And she was born into a very devout family, and from a very young age, she wanted to live for God. And her mother and father and the family, she would hear all these stories about saints who'd been martyred. And the way the theology was presented to her, if you're martyred, if you're murdered and killed in some way, and at that time the Moors were in Spain, and there were Catholic soldiers fighting against the Moors, and some of them were killed. And so she decided, she was about 6 or 8 years old, I think, and she persuaded one of her brothers, she had many siblings, that she just decided that if you were martyred, you just went straight to Jesus. And you could just skip this whole process of life, which was dangerous because she might fall into something that, would take her away from Jesus. But she could just short-circuit the whole system, she persuaded her brother, and they packed up whatever little children pack up, and they just started marching down the road. They ran away they were running away from home. They were going to find the Moors and put themselves in harm's way, get their heads cut off, and go straight to Jesus. It was perfect child logic, like, why not do it? And she wasn't doing that because she wanted to suffer. She was doing that because she loved Jesus. And she loved Jesus so much that what she really wanted above all was to be with him. And if this would work, where is the sacrifice? Where is the suffering? You take something that's of great value, which was your life, but her life, even, the great life stretching in front of her, it had no value compared for her love for Jesus. So when Swamiji is there, and Master just answers him, and Swami even adds, sternly. Master said sternly. So he was correcting Swami and scolding Swami in a certain way. Swami was expressing fear. And he was also expressing, and I never talked to Swamiji about this, so this is not like I know this exactly, but Master didn't want him, conceivably, I'm just going to present this as possible, he didn't want Swami thinking of himself. And there was Swami, you would think it would be a valid thing to think about. I don't want to fall into temptation. I don't want to be presumptuous and imagine that all that, that I can play such a public role and be safe. And Master didn't care. You would think that would be something to care about. In another context, Master said to Swami, when Swamiji expressed a certain concern, because I believe one of his gurubhais got swept up in egoic temptation, was pulled away from the path. And then Swami said to Master, that's why I don't want to have this role, because I don't want to fall from ego, meaning fall from grace, fall from attunement. And Master then answered Swami very differently. He looked at him, and it was the same concern. He expressed the same concern at different times. And this time, Master said to him, you will never fall from ego. Meaning that fear of yours is groundless, and just put it aside. I mean, and the way Swami tells the story, Master gave him his full energy. And of course, it was the Guru's promise at that point. So whatever fear Swami might have had on that issue, deep inside his soul, he had the Guru's promise that the Guru would protect him, that he was safe. But this time when Swami asked that really said exactly the same thing, Master just said, your self-concern, that's what he was tossing aside. Living for God is martyrdom. You may have these preferences. What do I care about your preferences? What does God care about your preferences? And yeah, that's tricky, isn't it? So the challenge that we have to figure out is how not to feel those things as a loss, but to feel those things as, what a glorious opportunity. What a marvelous moment I have to just give out of love. And of course, when you give something that's hard for you to give, and our attachment to all kinds of things, including our attachment to our delusions. Sometimes it's very hard to give up those delusions. Our delusions comfort us in some strange way, and we sort of want them to be taken seriously. Swamiji made a very interesting comment once. He was talking about it came in many different ways, but one time he was talking about the fact that he felt a cold coming on. He felt the cold germs. He was in the midst, it was in the early years when he was working all the time, teaching all these classes in order to earn enough money to buy the land, to build the first community, to build Ananda village. And he was driving down the highway just from one city to the next, I think late at night, And all of a sudden, he felt a cold just come on to him. The germs just entered him, and he felt that energy coming in. And he realized he did not have time to get sick. There was just no margin in his life to get sick. And he spoke out loud, I think, to the germs. He said, get out, just like that. And they did. They just left like that. And Swami had talked about that example in an interesting way. He says, the way that the shadow, the darkness, Satan, if you want to call it that, the way Satan gets into us is it persuades us that we have to relate to him. He said that delusion comes into us and it persuades us that we have to stop and think about it. We have to stop and think about this. You know, like I have to consider how I feel about this, what I want, what I don't want, what my plans are, what my plans are not, my anxieties about this. And it comes into us, and then all of a sudden, because we enter that vibration, it's like Master puts it that thoughts are not thoughts are not individual. Thoughts are universal. And they represent vibrations of consciousness. And what happens to us, we think that we're thinking our own thoughts. We think that we're in charge of all this. We think a lot of stuff that's really silly. And that's one of them, but this is Maya. This is the world we live in. But it's like, I think of it like geologic strata. Like if you were looking at a sandstone cliff, or in America, the Grand Canyon, which was carved by the Colorado River over, millennia. And so you can sort of see all these different geologic strata where the water gradually ran down the canyon. And the stratas are all different like this. And so these are different vibrations of consciousness. And once we enter a certain vibration, then it opens us up to this great field of energy. So Satan presents us with a certain idea. I'm weak in this way. I want this. I can't get along without that. This is, what I have to do like this, whatever it might be. And when they're downward pulling ideas, as soon as we begin to vibrate with those ideas, then it's like we open a portal. And everything that's on that level of consciousness just rushes in. Now, there's many different ways to deal with this, and in the scope of time I have here, I can't talk about all of them. But one of them, as Swami also talks about, he talks about himself as that he had an inclination toward moods for a period of time, and he said he fell into a sad or a dark mood, whatever it was. It was his consciousness fell. And he tried to reason his way out of it, and this and that, and nothing was working. So he sat down and he very strongly put his attention at the spiritual eye, and he was able, because he had the willpower and the energy to do it, to simply shift his vibration. And as soon as he shifted his vibration, he was in front of another portal of energy. And the folly of that idea came to him. He could see that it had no reality once he was just, just a little above it. He could see it very differently. So when Swami says to Master, I'm worried about this, living for God is martyrdom. Now, what he was saying, and Master could say that to Swamiji, because he knew how much Swamiji loved Master. He knew that Swami's whole heart and soul and being were given over to his Guru. That's why Master could say, you have a great work to do. And elsewhere, Swami says that Rajasi added, Master has a great work to do through you. And then Rajasi said, and he will give you the power to do it. And the reason Master could give Swami the power to do it was because Swamiji wanted to give everything to Master. And he every part of him wanted to do that. Swami was a martyr, but not a martyr in the sense of suffering. He was a martyr because he wanted to give everything of value, which just meant everything that he was, everything he had that was of value. However Master saw that, he wanted to give all of that to Master. Why would he keep any of it for himself? I mean, we have lots of reasons why we want to keep it for ourselves. But do we want to want that? Swami wrote that chant, which is not sung very often because the words are so funny. I'm determined no more to want to play. Is that right? Have I got it correct? I'm determined no more to want to play. And it's such a funny, every time I heard it, I thought it's so odd. And and it has this really bouncy little melody that goes with it. I'm determined no more to want to play. I actually found, I just recently, that's a line, that's what Master said to Swami at one point in conversations with Yogananda, and I don't know which number it is. It was Master himself who said that phrase. And so then Swami put it to music. And what it is, and what I think of it is like that, it's what we have to break the desire to not want to give. I'm determined no more to want to play. It's not even determined no more to play. I just don't want to want anything but you. I really don't want to want anything but you, because that's the problem, of course, is that we want many things. You know, we want to want only God. I had trouble for many years with the chant, I want only thee, Lord, thee, only thee. Because if you do an affirmation that is a little too far for you, it actually weakens you. This is one of the important subtleties of affirmations. Because if you say, I want only thee, Lord, and your subconscious mind says, ha ha, you, who are you kidding? You know, every time you say it, your subconscious fights you. So I want only thee, Lord, but it didn't fit the rhythm of the song. So I want only thee, Lord. I want to want only thee, Lord. I want to want only thee, Lord. I want to be a martyr in the beautiful way that that's stated. I want to give everything that's of value. I mean, how does it serve if you say you love someone and then you just give them your cast-offs? You give them things that are not good, that I myself don't want for myself because they're awful, but I'll give them to you. What kind of a gift is that? What does that mean? Master has one of his whispers. It's so explicit and it's so sweet. We want to find as much joy in spending for others as we enjoy spending for ourselves. Like how much more clear could that be? And every time I'm sort of either buying for myself or buying for someone else, I think, let it all just be the same. You know, I want to want only thee. And I want to be a martyr. I want to take the best that's in me. And I want it to be as automatic as a mother has a baby growing in her womb. And automatically, the best goes to the baby. And the mother just pours her life out in it. The father pours his life out into the life of the children. A friend of mine who was a professional ballet dancer, he was a beautiful dancer, wonderful dancer. And you age out pretty quickly in that profession. And so he went into what you do if all you know how to do is be a ballet dancer. He became a ballet teacher. And I was so moved when he spoke to me, and he said, I always thought that the highest possible joy was when I could dance. He said, but I've discovered, he said, that there's a higher joy. He said, it's helping others to dance. It was so simple, but so profound, isn't it? I always thought that the highest joy was to get what I want. I have all my desires and everything that I think is going to make it work for me. I have it all figured out. And even Swami says, and I want to be careful because I don't want to fall into ego. Living for God is martyrdom. All we do is give. All we do is give. And what is the end of it, though? The end of all of that, the tiny bubble of laughter becomes the sea of mirth itself. Can you think of anything that's lighter and freer and more marvelous than a sea of mirth? You know, just sort of like lots of really good jokes bubbling around, you know? What can it be? And you're a little bubble floating around with all those good jokes. You know, in this house, my housemate Keshava shares my sense of humor, so we laugh a lot. And it's just, sometimes the laughter just overcomes you. And you think, the sea of mirth, what would it be like? And you know what also happens when you laugh? This is something that occurred to me recently. There's no past and there's no future when you're laughing. When you're really caught in laughter, everything disappears except the laughter. And that's one of the reasons why it's so rejuvenating and free. We come in, the only reality is the present moment of consciousness. So when he says at the end of it all, the tiny bubble of laughter becomes the sea of mirth, and then we surrender ourselves to the eternal now. So there you have it. Living for God is martyrdom, but martyrdom is joy. So let's end our evening with one more chant. Thank you so much for sharing this evening. We'll run the chant right to the end of the broadcast. So I'll say God bless you, and it's been such a joy to be in your company.
And I think we can all guess what chant we're going to
Oh,
play
yes,
now.
how about that?
I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more. I'm determined no more to play. I'm determined no more to want to play. I'm determined no more to play.
we are done with the broadcast. Thank you so much.